Jay's Custom Creations is sponsored by Bits and Bits. Use the code JBates to save 10% off your next router bit or CNC bit purchase at bitsbits.com. And a special thanks to PaperStone, a recycled paper and resin solid surface panel. I often say that the best lessons learned are lessons earned, meaning you can learn as much as you want by researching something, but you're going to learn the most by actually doing and earning that lesson. Anyway, this is $1,000 worth of lessons learned. I designed the outdoor kitchen space on my back patio to have two matching pieces of furniture, a kitchen sink island and a farm table. Both the bases will be painted the same color and the tops will be matching butcher block tops. And this is what I designed about 2 years ago, and I'm finally getting around to just completing it all. Well, I went ahead with the design and bought $1,000 worth of FAS maple, glued it all together over many, many days because, as the saying goes, you can never have too many clamps. I really don't have that many clamps, and my planer is 16 inches wide, so I wanted to glue it together in sections that allowed me to skip plane the sub-assemblies before gluing them all together. So basically what you have here is 1 day of clamps, 2 days of clamps, and 3 days, and then you clean them up and glue them together for 4 days, and then you multiply that by 2 because I did 2 tops, one for the sink island and one for the farm table base. Now on the farm table, I went so far as to finish it, put it on the CNC machine, cut out a couple knots in it, and inlay some walnut, I guess, dog bone bow ties. And by itself, I thought it looked great. I thought it looked fantastic. I still think that slab looks fantastic. But when I put them on, or when I put the tabletop onto the base and stood back, I thought, it just doesn't look good. It just doesn't fit the space. Something about it just doesn't fit the space. Got the expert opinion of my wife, and she confirmed it just doesn't fit the space. So solid surface was definitely the answer. We debated it before we started. That's where we should have started. I'm not going to take a loss on all of this because I did the math and I should be able to basically double up my money cutting it into cutting boards, but that's something I'll pursue down the road. Instead, time to switch gears and go to a solid surface type of material for the kitchen island top as well as the farm table top. This is, it's heavy, but it is PaperStone. It is a solid surface material that looks and performs like stone, but you can actually work with it like with typical woodworking tools. It machines so well. I'm recording this part of the video after all the work is done. This is the sinkhole cutout, and I'm going to use this for a fun project in the next video. But this is what we went with. It's PaperStone. I got this based upon a recommendation from a friend of mine who put this in his outdoor kitchen about an hour from me. He did that about 3 or 4 years ago, and it's withstood the same climate that it's going to experience here in my location. So good performance with him. I'm hoping to get good performance in my outdoor kitchen. Let's jump into the build, and we'll see what I actually did. I have a SketchUp model for this build with all of the measurements in digital space, but it's always best to measure the actual physical item when possible. This island has been done for a few months, and we've kept the top covered with a sheet of foam. All of the measurements checked out, but when I measured the diagonals, I realized the cabinet was 1/4 of an inch out of square. Not too bad for a 4 foot by 8 foot cabinet, basically. And that means that the top will be about 1/8 of an inch out of square from side to side. I'm okay with that. With the measurements confirmed, I wanted to cut a full-size template first. This is 1/8 of an inch tempered hardboard, and cutting this allows me to verify the final size of the top physically in place on a $13 per sheet panel before cutting into the good stuff. I want to use the full length of the sheet, so I'm only cutting to final width on the sink side and cutting the faucet and soap dispenser holes to verify those as well. On a project this size, a $13 template that I can repurpose for other stuff down the road is a small price to pay to verify accuracy on the final material. Everything checks out, so it's time to cut the PaperStone. I have two 4 foot by 8 foot by 1 inch thick panels on this cart, which is way too heavy for the casters. So checking the boxes of stuff I've never done before, I split 2 casters rolling back to the CNC machine. And that's because this is not light by any means. The delivery was just under 1,000 pounds, including the shipping pallet, and I'm not 100% positive, but I think each of these panels is somewhere around the 350 pound mark. So what exactly is this PaperStone stuff? PaperStone is USA made, it's manufactured in Washington State, and it's made from post-consumer recycled paper and old cardboard container paper. Layers of this paper are pressed into a stone-like panel using resin made from industrial byproducts that would otherwise go into the waste stream and have been specifically designed to produce a hardwood-like, highly workable, non-brittle composite panel. I was unsure how it would cut at first, so I made the first pass with the dust boot off to visually inspect the cut. And just like the marketing info says, it actually cuts wonderfully with no visible chip out. So I paused the cut, installed the dust boot, and let the machine do the rest of the work. Just like with the template, I'm only cutting to final width, establishing the sinkhole area and cutting the holes for the faucet and soap dispenser. I've got a fun idea for the sink cutout material that I'll cover in another video. Off the machine and back onto the broken cart to free up the CNC for another template. Because I only cut the PaperStone to final width, I need a radius template for the perimeter corners, and this is just a chunk of MDF with a 1/2 of an inch radius cut on the corners and a pair of fences screwed to the side. This template straddles the corner, and a flush trim bit with a top bearing is used to transfer the MDF radius to the PaperStone. And to be honest with you, I rocked the router a little bit, it dug in a couple spots, wasn't too happy about that, caused more work for myself, but in the end, it worked. 1 down, 3 to go, and speaking of 3, working with me, myself, and I is always a coin flip between good company and smelly sarcasm. Now the sanding can starting with the corners and narrow faces. Hand sanding the routed corners and routed faces wasn't bad, but the factory cuts were just taking too long to do by hand. So I broke out a powered sander, and I was trying to avoid this because I have a really bad habit of not holding the sander parallel to the face when working on the narrow edge faces, and I oftentimes cause more damage and more work than necessary. But with the help of a rolling stool to help steady the sander, it really wasn't too bad. With the narrow faces sanded, the edge profile was cut with a router. Now, I wanted a bold, simple, refined look, so I used a 1/8 of an inch roundover bit. I only wanted to flip this thing once, so until now it was upside down. And flipping the panel over by myself on this tiny cart was by far the most nerve-wracking part of the entire build. Luckily, I didn't inhale the pesky fly in my shop and drop the panel. More routing to establish the 1/8 of an inch roundover on the top edge. And now the final sanding can begin. PaperStone really does work the same way as wood. And just like wood, the higher you sand, the higher the sheen you can get. So I started with 100 grit, making sure to sand in a grid, traversing the full panel left and right with a 50% overlap followed by front to back. This is the same technique you should use when sanding wood panels. Sanding in a grid pattern eliminates the small dishing that can happen if you try to focus on just the bad areas. The PaperStone finish prep videos recommend using lacquer thinner, or similar, between coats to help remove the excess dust. I followed this recommendation on the island top, but used a brush and a shop vac on the tabletop and really didn't notice any difference. Rinse and repeat through the grits. Now I'm after a matte finish, so I only used 100, 120, and 150 grit on the island top. Now for finishing, PaperStone recommends an oil wax finish, specifically Osmo Top Oil. I don't have any and wanted to use what I had on hand, so I finished with Odie's oil, which is a similar finish, starting with the edges. And then using a cheap polishing wheel from Harbor Freight. This is the 7-inch polisher, and I can't really give it a thumbs up. It can't maintain a constant speed under even the slightest amount of resistance, and was ramping up and down in speed way too much. Thumbs down on this one. Also, I accidentally applied way too much finish, which is not only wasteful, but also a pain in the butt to buff off. I found that using a jointer push pad wrapped in rags was the easiest way to remove and buff off the extra finish. With the more difficult of the two tops done, the rectangle farm top can be cut, and I put the top panel on the CNC and snapped chalk lines because the CNC spoil board will act as a perfect supporting surface for the circular saw cuts. However, after making some test cuts with my circular saw, I really did not like the resulting cut face quality. The CNC cut faces on the first panel were easy to clean up, but the factory circular saw cuts took quite a bit more effort to get them perfect. I really wanted to show how easy it is to cut with regular power tools, which it is, but with that info in mind, I decided to ditch the circular saw and chalk lines and just use the CNC again. Here's a tip to make the cuts super clean if you use a CNC machine. This is a 3/8 of an inch diameter compression bit, taking a 1/4 of an inch deep cut per pass. In VCarve Pro, I set the last depth to be 0.05 inches with a 0.015 inch offset into the material. This means the final pass cleans up the entire wall of the cut with a shallow full depth cut while also inducing very little lateral force on the final pass to reduce the piece shifting. This setup was a little different. I'm cutting the entire profile to establish the corner radius, which means my only clamping area is on the waste material. To stop the tabletop from shifting when it is cut free from the waste, I can use tabs, which require more work to clean up. I can just rely on the weight of the panel to hopefully keep it in place, or I can use a J-Bates 86 model mobile clamp. I planned on walking onto the panel during the last cut, so I programmed the start and stop location of both the toolpath and the job to be at the back of the machine. You can see here that the bit left a tiny veneer in a few places. This tells me that my spoil board needs to be flattened once again. And you can also see that the final edge of the cut is really clean. Very little sanding required. Taking advantage of the current situation, adding the roundover to the bottom surface was easy to do while still on the CNC machine. A little dust cleanup work, a very careful flip, and some sketchy wiggling onto a pair of sawhorses for the rest of the finish prep process. Again, sanding through the grits, but this time I made two just bonehead mistakes. I was zoning out on some music and I didn't realize that I not only kept my sander in Rotex mode the entire time, but I also took it up to 220 grit for some reason, and we'll see this mistake in just a moment. After sanding the edges, the final 1/8 of an inch roundover is cut. I really like the small roundover look on a thicker panel like this. It produces a bold yet refined look. This time I applied the finish by hand. It took about the same amount of time, anyway it felt like it did, as using the 7-inch polisher, but I used a lot less finish this time. After buffing the finish off, I stood back to kind of get disappointed. I realized the mistake I made with my sander. Oh my goodness, it looked so bad. 100% technique error. I goofed up. So in my frustration, I left the shop for the day and let the finish cure overnight before starting over. Finish prep attempt number 2, and this time in random orbit mode only, with the interface pad to hopefully blend the sanding pattern even more. I made sure to stop at 150 grit this time. After my Harbor Freight 7-inch polisher disappointment, I gave the Craftsman 10-inch orbital polisher a try, and this made applying the finish fast and easy, but again, I'm not giving this polisher a thumbs up either. It vibrated enough to make my 2-cycle weed eater feel jealous. It is horrible on the fingers, but it worked pretty good. This is day 5 or 6 of these PaperStone tops being installed, and we could not be happier. This is, well, first off, that's distracting. This looks like a stain. This is actually a shadow from those lights. Took me way too long to realize that a second ago. Anyway, they were super simple to install. You install this type of countertop to solid surface similar to the way you would install like a Formica top. You screw through the bottom into it to secure it, or I did anyway. When I built this base, I put some plywood strips here and here on both sides that I could screw through and secure this. And of course, all the plumbing, and that's basic plumbing stuff. We have all of our usable storage on the left and right ends. So this end over here is for like entertaining supplies or whatnot, or just using the space supplies. This side is for cooking supplies and charcoal and whatnot over here. So this is my area primarily because I do all the cooking in the house or in the family. And then my wife uses all that side, so that's pretty cool. This down here is access to the waterproof sub panel, the water heater, and the drain and whatnot that we have under here. So we piped in electricity when we had the slab done, so it goes underneath the slab and comes in here. Same with water. And then from here I branched out with some circuits for the rest of the space. But these countertops, don't they just look so nice? It is a beautiful, beautiful matte finish, and I'm not sure if the details are going to show up, but there's like this speckly stone type of a look to it that we really, really, really like. It cleans really easy. We get a lot of pollen and dirt and debris and all this crap, and you just grab a rag and just do a little dry brush, get the pollen off, and yeah, could not be happier. This installed the same way I would install a normal top on a table. I use these tabletop hold down clips that I always use and really recommend. Just make sure to drill pilot holes for your screws first. Don't mind the mess. I have a 4-year-old, and this is real life. This isn't a staged YouTube ending. Anyway, we love it. We absolutely love it. The space is almost complete. There's a few more things that I need to do. I got to figure out the curtains, get them to where they're stationary but still slide left and right, so I don't have to worry about flammable issues. I have to pull this out every time I use it because fire, obviously. And I have to build one long bench and then I think 6 stools to go around this side. I think after that, the space is technically what I would consider done. Another picnic table over here, fire pit seating over here. But there's a couple things that I want to do. I want to put a projector screen right there, and then a fold up projector right here to come down and shoot this way. That way the adults can sit around the fire and enjoy it while the kids sit at the stools right here and watch a big old TV movie, or projector movie, I guess you could say. That's one thing that's on the bucket list. But other than that, just a little basic tidying up. And we love this space. We love this space. We love this space. And I can't get over how beautiful these countertops are. Moving from butcher block tops to this was such a good move. I love this color combination, the slate, essentially black, the slate, the black hardware with this Tuscan red. This combination really pulls everything else together, with the Kamado Joe being red and everything else being black. It just fits. I love the space. Cooked breakfast out here with the radio going, barefoot and shirtless like a redneck. Yeah, buddy. Anyway, a little bit of work to do. You guys take care. Have a great day. I'm going to enjoy this space, and hopefully you are able to create a space that you can enjoy equally as well. Take care.